rook takes
Rook
f3
takes
though.
F3.
Oh, and rook takes g3, blundered his queen.
Unbelievable. This game went up in flames.
Get ready for the greatest game of the greatest match of 2023. This is the Speed Chess Championship final. We're reliving the action. I'll reveal the match score at the end in case you don't know it. Now, why is this my favourite game of the whole match? Well, it's just absolutely cut and thrust. Wild swings back and forth. Just shows what an incredible fight it was. So Magnus Carlsen playing with black here, Hikaru Nakamura with white kicks off with e4. Now Carlsen goes c5, Sicilian. At this point in the match he was ahead by a point or two. This is the 5-minute section plus some increment on the clock. So we get knight f3, e6 and now c3. Hikaru going for this sideline Sicilian, preparing d4. We get knight f6. Sure, you can kick the knight, but it finds a home on d5. So Hikaru goes bishop d3. Weird looking move, you're blocked by your own pawn, but the moment black goes d5, which is what we now see, you can liberate that bishop with pawn to e5. Takes was also possible, of course. So the knight drops back. Bishop c2 prepares d4, and so Magnus kicks on with c4, preparing to take en passant if white goes d4. So to start with Hikaru castles, knight c6 pressures that e5 pawn, rook e1 defends, queen c7 attacks, queen e2 defends, and now this is what I love about both players, they're constantly trying to wrestle the initiative. So g5 from Carlsen, not afraid to throw that pawn down even if it compromises king safety in future. And how does Hikaru respond? Well, d4. He's not messing about either. He's not going to take here and let his centre drop immediately. That would have been better for black. So he does this, Magnus takes, bishop recaptures, but hang on, g4, knight d4, he's still allowing his centre to collapse. Magnus takes that one off, but Hikaru now gets a huge initiative. Now, why doesn't white take here? Well, then your rook drops on e1. It has to stay protected. So queen d1 is played, opens up this attack. The queen retreats. Now why doesn't Hikaru take this pawn? Well, this time it's connected with this knight springing into the game. You hit queen and bishop, queen retreats, bishop drops, and this is a really nice position for black. They've got the centre, the bishop pair, open g-file to attack the king. It's not what you want. So coming back here, Hikaru goes bishop to e3. He just chooses to develop his pieces. He could have also considered knight b5, but we see it in just a moment because Magnus goes h5, supporting this g-pawn once and for all, and now Hikaru could jump here, but again he doesn't. Now it looks really scary, but you can go rook b8 or king d8. You do actually cover the jump. Eventually you can drive back the knight, and although the king sits in the centre, black is a pawn up, and you've got a lot of pieces defending that king for the time being. Meantime, you're going to try and attack the white king. So very tactical position. Hikaru decides to go for bishop b5, and it's a trickier move than it looks on the surface because you pressure to take here twice, and how do you actually defend that? If you take here, which looks really natural, you're running into bishop d4, skewering queen to rook. And there's no e5 because of this pin and everything here, and this pin here, which means you can actually take that one, knight can't recapture, whoops, and you know, that's just game over. So what do you do about this one? Well, one option is to go knight c e5, top engine move, but we're not going to get too caught up on the Silicon Overlord this game, or we'll be here all day. So what does Magnus do? e5, a far more interesting move and still a good move, but it breaks all opening principles, pushing a pawn in front of your uncastled king in line with a rook, and somehow these guys know when they can get away with it. So Hikaru, understanding he doesn't have to move the knight because takes and bishop recaptures will be terminal for black. With check, the queen will drop. He therefore plays pawn c4, just exploding the position. Now, how does Magnus respond? Well, again, not the best move, but far the most interesting. So the computer wants to take on d4 with the knight, or go bishop b4, but here Magnus goes a6, says please take here, liquidate a set of minor pieces, then I might be okay, but Hikaru just carries on with the brilliant moves. He plays knight to c3. So he's leaving 2 minor pieces hanging on 2 different squares. I mean, how fantastic is this game already? And again, what should black do? Top move? Well, knight e7 is apparently best to cover d5. Of course, the c3 knight is now pressuring that one, but Magnus just takes up the gauntlet, says show me the money, picks up the minor piece, so Hikaru now crashes through, picks up a tempo on the queen, and now here he makes a mistake. Now he wants to go knight c7 check, pick up the rook, but the d4 knight is hanging, so he's got to do something about that first. So naturally, you want to take on c6 and then land the check. Now if black captures with the pawn, that's great for white. But what if black captures with the queen? You cover the square, and this is probably where Hikaru stopped. But if you go one step further in the line, you can take the pawn on b5, and the queen is distracted if it captures. You land a royal fork this time and pick up the queen. So after takes here, you can't stay on the c line anywhere, you know, c4, or rook c1 comes. So the queen sidesteps, still rook c1, huge initiative for white despite being down a piece. So that was the way to go, but Hikaru takes here. Watch that evaluation bar on the left hand side. This is the first huge swing back. Now suddenly the game's equal because Magnus goes rook b8, Hikaru lands a check, the king sidesteps, bishop b6, sets up some nasty discoveries, but Magnus just calmly carries on with bishop b4, hitting the rook, and actually he's suddenly solving his problems, developing his pieces. Now this is the moment where the engine says knight d5 check is best. Do land that discovered check. I mean, at the moment you can't take, by the way, with that knight because it's pinned by the queen. There's all sorts going on. There's knight a6 check discovery possible, but the rook is defended by 2 knights, and you know, then you'd be 2 minor pieces up at the end of those lines. So much going on, right? But Hikaru just says, I'm going to save my rook, which you're attacking. Surely I'm still better. But now Magnus, he is winning. The bar's swung back to him. Because look at this. King e7. He steps back to the e-file. He's just come from. He's making a run for it. And amazingly, after knight d5 check, king f8, that king sits pretty, safe. And after bishop c7, super tricky move, Magnus navigates these tactics just as well as Hikaru. So how many of us here, rook attacked, are going rook a8, right, to save that rook? Such a natural move. Well, you've just blundered because the knight can take on b4, this knight recaptures, bishop d6 check, king goes, you pick up this one, white is winning. But the depth at which these guys are seeing, and I just want to show you the clock time. So let me just come back a move. So Hikaru, 52 seconds, Magnus 28. So bishop c7 played in about 10 seconds. Magnus now goes bishop c5 in like barely a second, right? Because they're getting increment. He instantly responds with that one, knows not to move the rook, counterattacks Hikaru's. And after Hikaru retreats, only now does he move his rook to a8 because the tactic no longer exists. There's no longer knight takes on b4, eliminating the bishop. Just exceptional how much they're seeing, and we don't even realise when you're watching it live. So queen d2 is played by Hikaru. He's pressuring now to go pawn b4, kick that bishop, and Magnus goes king g7, tucking his king all the way into the corner. Now we get b4, and this is the next swing of the game, because what should Magnus do? Well, bishop f8, retreat to the home square, cover some key dark squares, and most importantly, don't go bishop d4 and allow this liquidation, because after this one and knight captures, Magnus has blundered. He wants to play knight takes on d4, hit this rook, set up lots of nastiness with knight f3 check and pawn recaptures and nasty stuff here with the queen, you know, really big attack. But what he's missed in this line is that the rook can take, and if knight recaptures, which you want to play, then there's bishop takes on e5, check, and then this knight drops, white's winning. Even though an exchange down here, by the way, white is still winning because 2 pawns for it, plus a monster outpost knight, unopposed dark squared bishop, this pawn's dropping, king safety is an issue, white's better. So Magnus has to take with the pawn, but now b5, and that knight is unstable, then the pawn is dropping. So d3, flicked in, Magnus counterattacks on the rook. Now to be fair, Hikaru could have taken here. So much to calculate at every turn in this game. This is still better for white, but Hikaru goes for this one. Also a good move, also still better for white. Magnus retreats the knight to d8. He's heading for e6, trying to stabilize. So Hikaru jumps with knight e7, hits the queen. It saves itself. And now there is a threat for black to go knight e6, interrupts this connection, and then the queen would be attacking the knight from e6 would be attacking this bishop. You know, there's so much going on, right? So what should Hikaru do here? Well, his best starting move is queen c3 check. He plays it later, but it should come here because this queen is x-raying this one and it's unprotected. So when Hikaru goes f4, it would be a good move in some circumstances. You know, if this queen moves now, it's a good move. But after pawn takes en passant, you've got an issue. Because what Hikaru wants to do is rook takes. He's activated the rook in a beautiful way. You know, this is coming and this is pressured and knight f5 and everything. But of course, the huge problem with this is the queen drops unprotected. So Hikaru suddenly realizes when he gets here, oh crap, I can't capture like that. Now what am I going to do? There's all this pressure here. Knight e6 coming. So he retreats the bishop to block the g-file. Now Magnus goes knight e6. The queen hits the knight. It saves itself. And now h4. And it's Magnus with the initiative. Magnus with the advantage. So queen c3 check comes. But guess what? This is now another swing in the game because they're both on seconds. Such a wild position. And what should Magnus do? Well, f6, but it looks so counterintuitive because suddenly the knight hangs. You know, the rook can take that one. However, if you do that, the pawn takes the bishop and it's black attack raging, you know, not white's. So if check, the king sidesteps and there's nothing further. You know, this knight's a great defensive piece. Meanwhile, black's just crashing through on the king side there. It's just completely game over. So this knight after f6 is basically immune. What else to do? I mean, you can take here, stopping the pawn recapture because rook takes, skewering, but now black can just slow play it. You can jump with knight e5. You can go rook h6, preparing rook g6, and black just has this overwhelming attack basically. But coming back here, Magnus blocks with the knight, and this is now an eternal pin. Because after rook takes here, you can't capture this one or the rook recaptures and skewers queen to king. Now that is what Magnus played because if you go something like rook h6 immediately to defend the square, well the bishop now escapes, adds pressure, there's no dark squared bishop for black and this is just purely game over, the piece is dropping, that's it, nothing else to say. So Magnus goes for this. Rook recaptures, now rook h6, and Hikaru, love to see it, real grandmasterly chess. Does he rush this one? No. Rook f1, bringing more force to bear on the f6 square. So Magnus now takes, pawn recaptures, he chucks in d2, bit of a randomizer, low on the clock. Hikaru takes, now the queen is made to distract this rook. Magnus recaptures, but this rook simply slides back. This is an eternal pin that's about to drop off. You can't defend with the knight, of course. It's game over. Magnus resigns it. What an absolute classic game. And this is how the commentators were reacting when the whole thing was going on.
Oh, rook takes
Rook
f3
takes
though.
f3.
Oh, and rook takes g3, blundered his queen. Magnus blundered his queen. He can't cover with the knight. Oh my gosh,
I don't know if
this
he
is
thought
nerves.
he had knight g4, but that was nerves, exactly.
He definitely thought he had knight g4. Now it's over. Knight e8, rook takes d1, and you
The rook
can't
comes
even
back
take the
to
knight.
f1.
And Hikaru wins.
Unbelievable. I think we were looking at about a 99% accuracy match the entire way, and this game went up in flames.
So the greatest match of the year and the overall score is on screen here. Magnus Carlsen took the day, just. I hope you enjoyed this one and see another exceptional game between these two players from the final match. Check out the video on screen. Thanks very much for watching and see you soon.